Hello, I hope you can hear me. I'm not sure if anybody's with me just yet. Apologies for being a couple of minutes late. I am still trying to figure out how to use my new laptop and get onto a live in somebody else's group. Just having a few technology problems. Not my forte, I have to say. Anyway, I have managed to figure out how to do it on my phone, so here I am. I will apologise now if I jiggle around a lot. I tend to talk with my hands, so I'll hopefully try not to jiggle too much. Anyway, I can see a couple of people popping on, so hello and welcome. Before I kind of go into the anxiety stuff, I'll just introduce myself just briefly. My name's Suzie and I'm a children's psychological wellbeing practitioner. Now, as a job title, that's not really very meaningful to a lot of people. So essentially what I do is I work in children's therapy. Oh, hi. I seem to have a problem with volume. I don't know why. Can you hear me okay? Can you just let me know if it's manageable or if I need to get rid of the headset and try with the phone microphone? Should I give it a go? I don't know. Let me just get rid of that one and see if the other one works better. Right, is that any better? Can you hear me now? If you give me a thumbs up or something just to let me know, and I'll speak up and use the phone's own microphone if that's better. I don't know what the problem is, but I had a little bit of a problem with sound the other day too, so I haven't quite figured out the technology side of things yet. I do apologise, but just if you could give me a thumbs up or something, just let me know if that's any better. Can you hear me okay? I don't want to lose people, so I will carry on. If it's a problem, just let me know. So a children's psychological wellbeing practitioner works using CBT therapy for children with mild to moderate anxiety and low mood issues, common mental health problems. And part of my job is working with parents as well. So um, so it's a little bit better. I'll try and be as loud as I can, so hopefully you'll be able to hear it. I think it sometimes comes through better on playback for some reason. I don't know why. But welcome to those of you who've joined us. I was just explaining what a psychological wellbeing practitioner is. Essentially what I'm going to focus on today is the anxiety bit of my job, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how parents can manage their own anxiety and also help to support their child as well, because this week has seen a lot of kids returning to school. And those that haven't returned yet will be returning next week. So it's a really anxiety provoking time for both parents and children with everything that's going on at the moment. And I know a lot of people are feeling really, really super anxious about the return and opening up of schools with the coronavirus situation, because we can't be 100% certain that it's entirely safe. So lots of people are worrying about the impact this is going to have on them and their children and their wider families as well. So, and that's perfectly understandable, because for the last 5-6 months we've been inundated in the media. The news and newspapers and social media have been full of negative stories about how COVID is affecting everybody. So, you know, it's understandable that people are going to be feeling really anxious. It's perfectly normal. And I guess that's the first point that I want to talk about, is the normality of it. Because, you know, we have a part of our brain that is designed to protect us from things that are dangerous. And this part of our brain is a very old protective mechanism that goes back to historic times. And it's still there because we need it. Our brain is designed to protect us. And that part of the brain, known as the sympathetic nervous system, when we detect some kind of threat, will immediately spring into action to prepare us to fight that threat. And it's part of our fight or flight system, or our threat system, sometimes it's called. So when faced with a threat, it makes sense to either run away or stand and fight. And to do either of those things, we need a lot of energy, a lot of resource. The difference being, with something like this, it's not a real physical threat in the same way that it was in olden times. But when we're watching the news, or we're thinking about the COVID situation, we're worried about our kids going back to school and all of the what ifs. What if this happens? What if my child gets sick? What if they pick it up and bring it home? What about the vulnerable members of my family? So when we're thinking and worrying about all of this stuff, it triggers that threat system. It triggers the sympathetic nervous system in our brain, and kind of generates that anxiety and that panic and some of those physical feelings that we get. Things like shakiness, the heart beating really, really fast, the knots in the stomach, headaches, tension, difficulty breathing, and all of those really unpleasant physical symptoms. And when they happen, that kind of sends us a message and tells us that something really bad is happening and this is really scary, and it's definitely something to be anxious about. So it reinforces that negative belief that something really terrible is going to happen. So we get trapped in that cycle of believing that something bad will happen when we think about sending our kids to school and schools opening up again. Now, I guess, like I said, this is normal. It is part of the protective mechanism in our brain that is designed to protect us from that threat. The problem being, we don't actually need it in this situation. It's not particularly helpful. What's happened is we're triggering that threat system when we don't really need it. So the best way of describing this is a little bit like when you put bread in a toaster. Put bread in a toaster, you leave it in a little bit too long. Can you not hear me at all? I don't know why that is. I'm having real difficulty. My volume's up as high as it can go, so I'm not entirely sure. I'll try and get it closer. Apologies for the big face, but I'm trying to get as close to the microphone as I can. Hopefully enough of you can hear me, and hopefully it'll play better on playback. If not, I'll pop back another time when I've sorted out my volume. I can pop back on maybe tomorrow or early in the week, just to recap some of this stuff if it's a problem. Yeah, so when you put bread in a toaster and you leave it in there too long, it burns. And sometimes when you burn the toast, the fire alarm will go off because the smoke detectors in your house can't tell the difference between a real fire and burnt toast. It is going to go off because it detects the smoke and it can't tell the difference. And that's a little bit like what's happening when we get super, super anxious when we start thinking about going to school. So it's a threat that we don't really need to respond to in the same way as that fight or flight system was designed for. However, this is a real situation that we are dealing with. So the best thing that we can do to manage this anxiety around COVID and going back to school is to take control of the things that we can actually do something about. So by making sure that we're wearing masks, keeping our social distance, washing hands, using hand sanitizer, and following all of the guidance, that puts us in the best position to minimize any risk. So as long as we are following all of those measures, we can be confident that we are doing everything that we can to protect ourselves. Other than that, if you're worrying about all these bad things that could happen, I guess it's about challenging some of those thoughts, because where do those thoughts come from? It comes from the fear, and it's the fear talking. It's the fear telling you that this is a huge, huge risk. If you actually challenge that for a second and look at the evidence, look at the statistics. How much of a risk is it really? In normal terms, this is no more risky than catching the flu. We have the flu in this country and people die from it. Seemingly healthy people die from it every year. But even that's with a vaccination program. But we don't shut down the country for flu deaths. And yet that still kills more people than COVID. So if you put it in perspective, it should help to reassess that risk factor, because anxiety comes from overestimating the risk of something, overestimating how scary something is and how likely that bad thing is to happen, and underestimating our ability to cope with it. So if you think about the statistics and do your homework and challenge that thought that this is, something terrible that is going to happen to me, look at the statistics and the likelihood of it actually happening. How many people are there? How many people have got it? How many people have died from it compared to other things? And do you know anybody? Are you in contact with anybody? And try to get a little bit of a reality check. Because by putting it into perspective, it makes it a little bit less scary than all of the news that you hear about it being terrible and out there everywhere. That's looking at the thought side of things. And there are a couple of other strategies that can be quite helpful for managing the anxiety. And one of the most important, quickest, easiest strategies to calm the anxiety if you are feeling really super overwhelmed, and this is something that you can use for yourself, but you can also use with your children to calm their anxiety if either you or your child is anxious about returning to school. All of those thoughts will race around in your head, and it'll lead you into a little bit of overwhelm and anxiety and panic. And when that happens, you can reset that threat system quite easily, because the threat system part of the brain works on the sympathetic nervous system. You also have another part of your brain called the parasympathetic nervous system, and that's our soothing system. Now, the two of them cannot work at the same time. So by triggering your soothing system, you will switch off the threat system. And the quickest, easiest way of triggering that soothing system is through simple breathing exercises. Now, one of the most simple ones to do is to breathe in for a count of 4. Breathe in through the mouth. Hold the breath for 5. And then breathe in through the nose for a count of 4. Hold for a count of 5, and then breathe out for a count of 6 through the mouth. So it's and do that a number of times just for a couple of minutes. By breathing out for longer than you breathe in, you will trigger the soothing system in the brain. And by triggering that, you will switch off the threat, and that will lower the anxiety. That works for any type of anxiety. And any type of panic or overwhelm. If you practice that every day for a couple of minutes, minute or so in the morning when you get up, a minute or so in the evening when you go to bed, it becomes a habit. It becomes soothing. It becomes a practiced strategy. So when you feel overwhelmed, you can access that more quickly and easily, and it works more efficiently. So it's a really quick and easy strategy for managing that overwhelm and getting rid of it and switching it off quite easily. That's something that you can do. It's something that you can teach your kids to do, and it's a really nice little trick for just soothing yourself quite simply. When people come into therapy for anxiety, one of the main types of therapy that we would do would be exposure therapy. Now, that sounds quite scary. And essentially what we do is we encourage people in a managed way to face their fears. Because what we know is avoiding things that we're scared of maintains their anxiety. If we avoid going to school because we're anxious, or we keep our kids off school because we don't want them to go because we're anxious, it keeps the anxiety going because it maintains that level of fear, and it doesn't give us the opportunity to learn that we can cope with it and that everything will be okay. Once we learn those things, once we learn it's not as scary as we think and that we can cope with it, then that reduces the anxiety and helps us to function more normally. So I guess one of my top tips when it comes to getting back to school and feeling anxious is accepting that that anxiety is normal. Lots of people are feeling it and it's totally understandable. But the anxiety is not going to hurt you. It is not dangerous in itself. The risk of COVID is relatively small, and as long as you are following steps to control the risk in every way that you can, then there's every reason to be confident that you can cope with it and that everything will be okay. So by facing it, by going to school, following through, over time, when you repeat that action, day after day after day, it will get easier. So the first day is going to be super scary. The next day will be a little bit easier because you've already done it once. The next day will get easier again. Before you know it, a week's passed, 2 weeks has passed, and things are kind of back to normal. So as scary as it is, it's about developing that talk for yourself and understanding that those feelings are perfectly natural, they're perfectly normal, they're not harmful, but keep telling yourself it will be okay and I can cope with it. Even if you don't believe it in the beginning, when you do it every day, you will end up believing it because that's how the brain works. So you've got facing fears, challenging thoughts, breathing exercises, and in terms of helping your children, if you've got anxious children, there's a couple of strategies that you can use for them too. First of all, swap with the reassurance. If they are asking you all the time for reassurance, is everything going to be okay? I'm scared. I don't know what's going to happen. If you find yourself jumping in and telling them it's okay, everything will be all right, I'm here, you'll cope, it's fine, and things like that, then swap that. Take away the reassurance, but tell them, yeah, I understand. I feel quite anxious about it too. I'm worried that these things might happen, but how are we going to find out what's going to happen if we don't go, if we don't try it? It is scary. Lots of people feel the same way. So we're swapping reassurance for empathy. We're saying, I feel like that. Other people feel like that. It gives them a sense of normality and it takes away the scariness of that anxious feeling. So we're swapping it for empathy and validation. We're telling them, you know what, everything is okay. I feel like that too. But let's just give it a go and see what happens. Let's find out if it really is as scary as we think it is. And encourage them to give it a go and be brave and build up that brave behaviour of trying things out so that we can truly learn everything will be okay if we give this a go. The other thing that I would really encourage you to do, now what I've found when I've worked with lots of parents in a therapy room, they often say to me that they hide their anxiety from their children. And when I ask them why they do that, the answer is always the same. I'm trying to protect them. I don't want them to see that I'm anxious. I don't want to pass my worry on to them. Well, here's the thing. Here's the news flash. They're going to pick up on that anxiety anyway because the chances are they're going to be feeling the same. By not talking to them about it, you're giving them that message that it really is something to be scared about. It's something to be avoided. It's something that we can't talk about, and it's something that's really bad. The majority of children are really, really insightful. They're really intuitive. And when people are anxious, whether it's you, whether it's your child, anxious people display certain behaviours. They'll fidget. They'll become a little bit isolated, they'll withdraw, they might talk faster, they might get snappy and irritable, but they will always have some kind of behaviour that tells other people that they're feeling not quite right in some way. Children will pick up on that. So if you're feeling super anxious yourself, it's really important to talk to them about it. Because if you're worried they're going to pick up on your anxiety, yeah, they're going to anyway. So you might as well be open and clear and have a conversation about it, because that gives them the message that it's normal. And that normality is so important when we're talking about anxiety. It's when they don't know it's normal that it becomes an issue and it gets overwhelming and it gets scary. So talk to them. If you're worried about it, you know what? Have a conversation. How do you feel about going to school next week or tomorrow or whatever? I feel quite anxious. I'm worried about, you catching something or bringing something home. But, let's have a little look at this. Let's do some research and have a look at the actual facts. Don't be guided by the thoughts, because thoughts are not real. They're not facts. Have a look at challenging some of those thoughts together. Go through some of the strategies I've talked about, but talk to your children openly and clearly and honestly, and use some resources. There's some really nice little stories. If you've got young children, there's some nice little stories that you can use to kind of guide them through that. I've got a couple of resources that I can share with you on that. If you'd like me to, I can drop them into the group. But talk and talk and talk. That is the biggest piece of advice I can give you. It's so important for children to get the message that anxiety is normal and it's okay and it's not dangerous. By hiding it, that's what they learn. But by talking about it more openly, they understand the normality of it. And when you talk about it openly and model how you cope with it and show them good, positive coping strategies, it gives them the skills to manage more effectively too. So that is probably my biggest piece of advice. So hopefully through my very quick, speedy journey through some strategies and understanding anxiety, hopefully you've got something helpful from that. I do feel like I've thrown a lot at you and I've spoken really, really quickly. I'm aware that some people have some sound issues and I do apologise. I'm not sure what's going on there. But if you'd like me to pop back and try again with maybe a different laptop, a different headset, and see if we can figure that out, I'm more than happy to run through it again. If anybody's got any questions, you all seem fairly quiet out there, but if you've got any questions or if you'd like me to clarify anything further, I'm happy to do so. And if you don't want to ask now, that's absolutely fine. Just drop them in the group and I will kind of monitor the post and I'll answer any questions that you have. I'm more than happy to do that. If you're a parent with particularly anxious children, I do have my own group for parents of anxious children, and that's called Beat the Anxiety Gremlin. I'll drop the link in the group too. I've also got a website with some free downloadable resources. So if you are struggling with kind of children's mental health, you can get some freebies there that you can use to help yourself and help your children. So I'll drop those links in. I hope that's been helpful. I hope you've got some strategies to take away to make it a little bit easier facing the return to school. But feel free to come and join my group for some more strategies, or feel free to ask more questions and I will do my best to answer them for you. And I will drop some resources into the group that might be helpful to starting conversations with young people around coronavirus and around going back to school. So if there are no more questions, that's all from me. Thank you very much for the invite to come and talk to you. I hope it's been helpful and hopefully I'll have a chat with some of you very soon. Have a lovely evening, have a lovely weekend and take care. Bye.